Hello, Summer English 1102 students, and welcome to my video lecture on Charlotte Perkins Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper. Um, Today we're going to read one of the best feminist pieces that's ever been written. But again, before we do this, make sure that you have a copy of the story in front of you. If it's this book here, it's on page 346. And open up that PowerPoint slideshow and go to slide number 27. By that PowerPoint slideshow, obviously, I mean the one in the prose folder, the English 1102 Pro or Summer 2015 Prose slideshow. Go to the 27th slide. That'll take you to the cover of one edition of Charlotte Perkins Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper, and that is her. Now, during her lifetime, Charlotte Perkins Gilman was probably more well known for her writings for women's suffrage, which of course is the right to vote, and probably more well known for her activism, her trying to get equal rights for women during her lifetime. So this is not a new fight. We hear now that a woman gets paid 77 cents for every dollar that a man gets paid for doing the same job. This is not something new. This is an argument that's been going on forever and ever and ever. So Charlotte Perkins Gilman was fighting for equal pay, voting rights, and many other rights of women that were being denied them throughout their lifetimes. Notice, by the way, look at the yellow shirt I'm wearing. See, this is, if you're not looking, you can go ahead and take a look. This is my yellow shirt to go with the yellow wallpaper. So I wouldn't normally wear a t-shirt, but I don't have a yellow polo shirt, so this is what we're stuck with. All right, so let us get started. Let's start with what's going on with our narrator here. So I'm on slide 28 now. Our narrator is suffering, in case you didn't quite pick up on it, she's suffering from postpartum depression because she's just had a baby, and of course, like many women that have recently given birth, she suffered from some kind of depression about that. And her husband is a doctor. And so her husband actually prescribed something for her called the rest cure. And you can see on this slide, 3 points down, that Weir Mitchell, who was a doctor out of Philadelphia at the time, actually was the one who created this rest cure. Now, if this sounds something like Charlotte Perkins Gilman possibly writing against Weir Mitchell because she went through this rest cure and it didn't help her, you'd be absolutely right. This was her motivation for writing The Yellow Wallpaper in the first place, was that Gilman herself went through this rest cure after she had given birth, and she felt like it did more harm than good. Maybe not to the extent that it does to our narrator in this story, but it did do her more harm than good. And she's writing against this. And many people now have said that this rest cure is bumpkiss, but at the time it was all the rage. All the women who were suffering from postpartum depression should be given the rest cure. And what the rest cure is basically a young lady is put away in a room, like our narrator here is, and she's not allowed to do anything. She's not allowed to do anything strenuous. She just lays around and does nothing. And this is going to be problematic for our narrator, especially since she has to do it during what should be her entire vacation. You may not have picked up on this, but the reason that our narrator and her husband and her newborn and her husband's sister, who is taking care of the newborn because our narrator is suffering from the depression, is because their house is being remodeled. Their home in town is being remodeled. So they've come to this, what seems like a haunted house. And she has been put up in an upstairs bedroom with bars on the windows. Now, you think of a building with bars on the windows, many people would think of a jail. And that's kind of what she was going for here, was it's like being in a prison. She's locked in this room with these bars on the windows and this hideous, hideous wallpaper. And we'll discuss it in some detail in a little bit. But I think that the wallpaper is just a catalyst for the important points that are being made in this story, more so than something that needs a whole heck of a lot of discussion. All right, so our narrator listens to her husband because he's a doctor himself. and he is prescribing this for her. So our narrator's husband isn't a bad guy. He's thinking that he's giving her a prescription for something that's going to help her. But where he ends up being a bad guy is that he doesn't listen to her. This is where the problems come in. And not only that, every time she tries to tell him that the cure is not working, he kisses her on the forehead and calls her a little goose. And I don't remember exactly what page that is in here. I've read it 100 times. But, he calls her his cute little goose. Oh, aren't you adorable? You think this isn't working. But it really is. And I'm a doctor and you should listen to me. And there's a double whammy for our narrator in that her brother also happens to be a physician who also believes in the rest cure. So now she's got two men who are supposed to be experts saying, you may think this isn't helping you, you may think it's hurting you, but we're doctors and we know it's helping you. Listen to us. So this is going to be a problem. All right. Now our narrator finds solace in writing. This goes to the voice of the narrator. Our narrator, as we've already established about 30 seconds ago, is not being listened to by her husband or her brother. Both of these men are saying, we're men, we're doctors, we know what's best for you. Basically, shut the heck up. Okay? So, she's being told not to speak up, that this cure is helping her. She also needs to write. But notice what's happening here, and I'm going to go in our book to... what page is it on in our book? It is on page 348. So if you don't have this book, it's about probably a page or somewhere on the second page or third page, depending on where you're at. At the very end, in fact, it's actually at the very end of that first section. Because notice it's set up like a diary, and this is an important thing to remember too. We're not getting narration like we get with our other stories where somebody says, well, on this day this happened, on this day this happened. Basically, we're getting a journal. We're getting some lady's journal, and we're getting a peek into what's going on in her mind and what's going on in her life through her journal writings. So at the end of her first entry, the very last sentence, there comes John, and I must put this away. He hates to have me write a word. So she wants to express herself. She wants to be heard. She wants a voice. Yet her husband and her brother are not listening to her. And, oh, by the way, she can't speak in writing either because writing, I guess, is too strenuous and her husband would disapprove. So she must do it in silence. And she's doing it under the hopes that nobody will ever read what's on these pages. Now, you and I are reading it, but she's hoping that nobody will ever read this. Okay. The nursery at the top of the house is John's choice, not the narrator's. We will talk about that in a little bit. Actually, let's talk about that for just a second. How do we know that the narrator doesn't want to be in that nursery and that's John's idea? She actually suggests, let's move. This is at the bottom of 348 in our book. And I mean the very bottom. You know the place is doing you good, he said, he being John. And really, dear, I don't care to renovate the house just for a 3 months rental. So she's asked him to renovate the room and make it better. He's saying, no, we're only renting it for 3 months. I'm not going to spend all that money renovating it. Plus, there are other houses being renovated anyway. That's why they're in this place to begin with. Then do let us go downstairs, I said. There are such pretty rooms there. Then he took me in his arms and called me a blessed little goose and said he would go down to the cellar if I wished and have it whitewashed into the bargain. But he's right enough about the beds and windows and things. It's as airy and comfortable as a room can be. So he kind of laughs at her. Okay, we'll go downstairs if you want to, even though he has no intention of doing so. And they never do. So it's his choice to stay in that room because he thinks it's what's best for her. Where she, again, is saying, no, it's not. We need to go downstairs. And he's like, yeah, whatever. So there's that lack of a voice. All right, so the wallpaper itself, sun-faded yellow and an ugly pattern, contributes to the narrator's descent into insanity. There are several passages about this, but let us take a look at what she says about the pattern itself. I think this is going to be... This is on 348, earlier than where we were. All right. This is towards the top of the page. If it's the first entry, 1, 2, 3, 4, about 4, oh no, about 5 up. So about 5 paragraphs from the bottom of the first entry. The paint and paper look as if a boys' school had used it. It is stripped off, the paper, in great patches all around the head of my bed, about as far as I can reach, and in a great place on the other side of the room, low down. I never saw a worse paper in my life. One of those sprawling, flamboyant patterns committing every artistic sin. The pattern is so bad it's literally committing artistic sin. This is driving our narrator crazy. It is dull enough to confuse the eye in following, pronounced enough to constantly irritate and provoke study, and when you follow the lame, uncertain curves for a little distance, they suddenly commit suicide. The pattern doesn't just stop in places, they commit suicide. It's that bad. Plunge off at outrageous angles, destroy themselves in unheard of contradictions. So the pattern is suicidal, it's bad, and then we go on. The color is repellent, almost revolting. A smoldering, unclean yellow. Not the yellow that you see in my shirt, this bright yellow. This is a yellow kind of like sulfur, which is kind of dirty and kind of smelly. And it's an unclean yellow. Kind of like somebody's unclean teeth if they never visit the dentist. It's that kind of a yellow. And this whole room is wallpapered in that color. Faded by the slow turning sunlight, it is a dull yet lurid orange in some places, a sickly sulfur tint in others. No wonder the children hate it. I should hate it myself if I had to live in this room long. And then, of course, she has to put her diary away. And then, of course, later she's going to say that the pattern was like eyeballs. So, you've got a repellent color with a repellent pattern or an offensive pattern. And this lady is going to have to be stuck in this room resting because she is sick. All right. John suppresses the narrator's creativity. He wants her to be more reasonable. We see this throughout. Doesn't socialize with others. Is John really a villain or is he just wrong? I would argue that he's just wrong. He tries to cure her. He thinks he's a doctor and he knows what's best for her. Problem is he doesn't know what's best for her. But I do want to go to the next point, which is the point where the moonlight exacerbates the hallucinations. Remember, what does our narrator see behind the patterns of this wallpaper? She sees what she thinks is a woman. Okay, let us go to where she starts to see it. Okay, on 349, about midway down, the paper looks to me as like it knew what a vicious influence it had. There is a recurrent spot where the pattern lolls like a broken neck and two bulbous eyes stare at you up and down. I get positively angry at the impertinence of it. Okay. We keep going. It starts off that she sees something back there, but she can't identify what it is. This is on page 350 of our book. And at the very end of the second entry. So whatever book you're reading is at the very end of the second entry here. On page 350 in our book. So she talks about the sub-pattern, so basically a pattern behind the pattern, so on and so forth. Then she says, but in places where it isn't faded and where the sun is just so, I can see a strange, provoking, formless sort of figure that seems to skulk about behind that silly and conspicuous front design. There's sister on the stairs, which means she has to put it away. So she sees a figure. She can't make out that it's a woman yet. But this is our first clue that she's starting to hallucinate something behind that pattern. So we keep going. And on page 352, at the very top of 352. So that was what, the second entry? the third entry. Kind of several paragraphs into the fourth entry. She's talking about, it is always the shape, only very numerous, and it is like a woman stooping down and creeping about behind that pattern. I don't like it a bit. I wonder, I begin to think, I wish John would take me away from here. It is so hard, and this goes back to what we said about if John's a villain or not. It is so hard to talk with John about my case because he is so wise and because he loves me so. But I tried it last night. It was moonlight. The moon shines in all around just as the sun does. I hate to see it sometimes. It creeps so slowly. It always comes in by one window and the other. So her mind is disjointed here. She jumps from the pattern to the woman behind the pattern to John to the moonlight, now back to that pattern again. So we're starting to see this insanity start to manifest itself in the fact that our narrator can't really concentrate on just one thing. Her mind keeps bouncing around and bouncing around and bouncing around. All right. I see it sometimes. Da da da. The faint figure behind seems to shake the pattern, and it keeps going on. And later in this, and I don't remember what page it is, but it does say that when the moon's not out, she can't really see this figure, but when it is out, that actually makes it more visible. All right. Let's go to the next slide. With time, the wallpaper draws the woman in. And we see the woman within the wallpaper, behind the wallpaper, and she starts trying to help the woman escape. This is towards the very end. Here's what's happening. I want you to pay attention to what's happening at the very end of this. In our book, it's probably on page 355. 355, this is towards the very last entry. And this is the last day. Hooray, this is the last day, but it is enough. John is to stay in town overnight and won't be out till this evening. Jenny wanted to sleep with me, the sly thing, but I told her I should undoubtedly rest better for a night all alone. So here's Jenny, the sister, saying, oh, I'll sleep with you tonight. And she goes, oh, no, remember, I'm supposed to be resting. I don't need the excitement of you being in here. So just go ahead and let me sleep alone. And, of course, Jenny's going to let her. That was very clever because I wasn't alone a bit. As soon as it was moonlight and that poor thing began to crawl and shake the pattern, I got up and ran to help her. I pulled and she shook. I shook and she pulled. And before morning, we had peeled off yards of that paper. So she is saying she wants out. She wants to escape. This lady that's behind here wants to escape. I need to help her escape. So I got up and I started ripping the paper off the walls. All right. But it gets better. A strip about as high as my head, about halfway around the room. And when the sun came and that awful pattern began to laugh at me, I declared I would finish it today. So she keeps going on and on and on. At this point, she's still ripping paper off the wall. This is on page 356 of our book. This is almost at the end of the story. She's still ripping the paper off the wall. Jenny, the sister, is trying to get her to come out. All right. Notice that almost towards the end, I have locked the door and thrown the key down the front path. I don't want to go out and I don't want to have anybody come in till John comes. I want to astonish him. I've got a rope up here, and even if Jenny did not find, if that woman does get out and tries to get away, I can tie her. So she's got a rope. Once that lady's, now remember, she's still thinking that's the lady behind the wall. She's going to tie that lady up once she escapes. Further down. Then I peeled off all the paper I could reach standing on the floor. It sticks horribly and the pattern just enjoys it. All those strangled heads and bulbous eyes and waddling fungus growths just shriek with derision. So she thinks that the wallpaper's screaming at her now because it's ripping it apart. Besides, I wouldn't do it. Of course not. I know well enough that a step like that's improper and might be misconstrued. I don't like to look out of the windows even. There are so many of those creeping women, and they creep so fast. So now, because she's been imprisoned in this room, she sees not only the lady behind the pattern, but she sees a lot of women creeping outdoors. And we actually get more of that earlier in the story. So now she's hallucinating women outdoors as well. All right. And the next thing she says, okay, I do not like, let's reread that again. I do not like to look out of the windows even. There are so many of those creeping women, and they creep so fast. Very next sentence, I wonder if they all came out of the wallpaper as I did. This is the turn. This is the point of no return. This is where our narrator has literally become that woman behind the pattern. All those women out there crawling around like I am doing right now, I wonder if they were hidden back here in this wallpaper with me. Did they come out of this wallpaper the same way I did? Our narrator at this point has become the woman that she was trying to rescue. At least in her mind she has. But I am securely fastened now by my well-hidden rope. You won't get me out in the road there. I suppose I shall have to get back behind the pattern when it comes night, and that is hard. So she's saying, oh, I'm out now, but tonight I'm going to have to get back behind that pattern again. Her insanity is complete. She is now past the point of no return. She's probably going to have to be institutionalized for the rest of her life. And then, of course, we go to the point where John comes in. He sees her creeping around. He faints, right? Actually, let's go to the very, very end here on page 357 of this book. But regardless of what source it is, it's the very last part of our story. It is from the very last. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. John has just entered. What is the matter? He cried. For God's sake, what are you doing? I just kept on creeping just the same, but I looked at him over the shoulder. I've got out at last, said I. In spite of you and Jane, I've pulled off most of the paper, so you can't put me back. So she's telling John, hey, you can't put me back there anymore. I peeled the wallpaper off. Ha ha, I fooled you, buddy. Now, why should that man have fainted? But he did, and right across my path by the wall, so that I had to creep over him every time. So John has fainted from shock at seeing his wife even more insane than he had ever meant for her to be with this rescuer. And she's so crazy that instead of stopping when he faints, she just crawls right over the top of him and keeps going, crawls right over the top of him, keeps going some more. Oh, another lap, crawls right over top of him, and she continues to do this over and over again. And now everything's just nuts. All right. So let me look through this and see if there's anything I've forgotten to mention. I know that I've got some questions under the feminist part. Hopefully I covered those. All right. So how does he contribute to her eventual descent to insanity? We've said because he's a doctor, he's given her a bad cure, and he won't listen to her, and he won't let her do anything that she needs to do, especially right. How is she both literally and metaphorically deprived of her ability to express herself? We've talked about that already. Let's see. How does the narrator's husband end up? That's almost the same thing we said before, wasn't it? How's the narrator's husband end up making her crazy despite his best efforts? And of course, there's nothing under the other ideas. Okay, so I think we've covered everything that might make a good paper topic. I hope that you have found this this presentation to be useful. I hope it's helped you understand the story better. I hope that you have a better grasp on just how crazy our narrator has gone in this story and why John is responsible for it. And if you have any questions, obviously, you can come contact me either by phone during my office hours, come visit me during my office hours, or you can shoot me an email and I'll try to help you out as best I can. So with that in mind, that is Charlotte Perkins Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper.